This is Common Ground, KCRW Berlin's new talk show encouraging debate and a deeper understanding of hot-button topics in the German capital and beyond. I'm your host, Soraya Sarhaddi Nelson. Today's show addresses a topic that Angela Merkel fears is tearing apart German society. KCRW Berlin's Dina El-Sayed explains. But first, a warning that this story includes violent, disturbing content.
Es ist eine Schande und beschämt mich zutiefst.
The Chancellor and other German officials often recount the horrors of the country's Nazi past and condemn anti-Semitism today. But that hasn't stopped a growing number of attacks on Jewish people and businesses and their places of worship across Germany. Here, in the capital, a new report found more than 2 such attacks happened every day during the first half of this year.
Ich habe einen Anruf bekommen am Freitag 6:20 Uhr.
This YouTube video shows a Jewish-owned tavern in Lichtenberg that was destroyed by arson last month. It's called Morgen wird besser, or Tomorrow will be better. But the owner isn't so sure anymore.
Bedroht oder irgendwas? Ich habe gesagt, ja, vom Nazis. Ich habe ihr auch gezeigt die Schilder.
He describes 5 break-ins to his establishment and being threatened repeatedly by neo-Nazis, and that he bought cameras and shutters to protect his property. Nothing helped.
Aber wie Sie wissen, hat nichts geholfen.
Wolfram Pemp is the anti-Semitism officer for the Berlin police.
Also ich glaube, die Unsicherheit ist zumindest größer geworden. Und das sollte uns in jedem Fall zu denken geben. Ja? Also
he says numbers aside, the issue here is how Jewish people feel about their safety.
Möchte ich in Berlin oder Deutschland bleiben, dann finde ich, ist es bedenklich. Fakt ist, der gesellschaftliche Anspruch.
Pemp says any man or woman in any part of the city must be allowed to wear a headscarf, a kippah, or Star of David without facing repression, violence, or fear of being confronted. That may be wishful thinking. A far-right faction with a state leader who dismisses the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin as a, quote, monument of shame is now the main opposition party in Germany. Last October, this armed German man heard firing here, tried but failed to force his way into a synagogue in Halle on the holy day of Yom Kippur. He is on trial for killing 2 people nearby. The year before, in Prenzlauer Berg, a Palestinian asylum seeker from Syria attacked a kippah-wearing Israeli Arab with a belt.
Wir werden sehen. Du wirst sehen. Jude oder nicht Jude? Du musst damit klarkommen.
The victim shouts, Jew or not, you have to deal with it. A conference last week at the new synagogue in Mitte addressed rising anti-Semitism and the report by the Department for Research and Information on Anti-Semitism in Berlin. The incidents the agency documented this year included 6 physical attacks, 25 cases of property damage, and 301 examples of malicious behavior, such as Nazi salutes. One panelist was Rabbi Naomi Henkel-Gümbel, who survived the Halle attack by the German gunman.
Wie lange braucht es bis zum nächsten Anschlag und wer sind die nächsten Betroffenen? Und das ist, denke
She
ich,
asked how long until the next attack, adding Halle shows it's not just Jews or other minorities who suffer.
Ich kann nur eins sagen.
Aber stattdessen wird sich auch noch auf die
An
Schulter
exchange
geklopft
between
und
her
stattdessen
and
meint
Federal
tatsächlich
Criminal
alle-
Police Vice
alle
President
denken
Jürgen
und
Peter
sagen, dass
shows
es ja
tensions remain over how the German police handle anti-Semitic attacks and whether the German government is doing enough to stop anti-Semitism in the first place.
That leads to the question on today's show, is it safe to be Jewish in Germany? With me in the studio are Sigmount Koenigsberg, Commissioner Against Anti-Semitism for the Jewish Community of Berlin, and Felix Klein, Federal Government Commissioner for Jewish Life in Germany and the Fight Against Anti-Semitism. Welcome to you both.
Hello, nice to be here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Joining us on the phone are Biplab Basu of ReachOut Berlin, a counseling center for victims of extremist, racist, and anti-Semitic violence, and Sharon Kuckuck, who is Jewish American and has lived in Berlin for nearly 2 decades. She organizes interfaith trips for Jews and Muslims and is the co-founder of Berlin's first Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom. Welcome, you two.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sigmund, I'm going to start with you with just a little bit of background for our listeners who may not know that there is actually a vibrant Jewish community here in Germany 75 years after the end of World War II. How large is this community and is it growing?
Our community has now about 10,000 members, and there's additionally about
10,000 Jewish people living in Berlin who are not specific members of the community, but who use our services. For example, the Jewish community wants the only Jewish kindergarten, the only Jewish primary schools. We have got a Jewish high school, and we have got a Jewish elder home. So we have a large rank of services for Jewish people to be comfortable, to feel safe.
Felix, let me ask you to give this sort of a national perspective. I mean, how many Jewish people live in Germany, and where do you find them?
Well, there are 100,000 members registered in the Jewish communities, and we estimate that there's another 100,000 people who are not registered with them. So, for instance, Israeli citizens who come here and sometimes go to the synagogue or use other infrastructure. And they are mainly in the big German cities. Berlin, of course, as the capital, is maybe the main center of Jewish life in Germany, but we have all over the country vibrant communities with growing numbers, Frankfurt, Munich, Düsseldorf. And it's great to see that in spite of the situation we will talk about in a minute, we still register a growing number of Jews in Germany.
Sharon, let me ask you, you've lived here for about 2 decades. So do you feel that it's dangerous to be Jewish in Berlin and Germany as a whole?
No, I don't. My experience overall has been good, though I do feel, because I'm closely connected to American politics and world politics, that in general there's a feeling of fear. I do feel the fear and the chaos that's being stirred and the hatred that is being stirred around in the pot. But personally, I don't feel unsafe to go to synagogue or Jewish events. For many years, I led Jewish groups here from America and guided them, and they were always very concerned to be here and more recently requested guards. And I used to think it wasn't necessary. But of course, now I understand the concern, and I do see, unfortunately, the rising security issues that are coming here too.
Sigmount, what about you? Do you feel safe here?
I feel safe because if I wouldn't feel safe, I would have to quit, but I don't want to, because Jewish life can only grow up in an open society, not in an atmosphere of fear and of hate. That can't work. But what we see, when people are not visible Jewish, mostly they're not attacked.
When you say visible Jewish, what do you mean? Like now...
By wearing a kippah, by wearing a Magen David, Star of David, then if you don't show that, no one knows you're Jewish or not. But for example, one of our rabbis had been attacked last summer, just from walking from the synagogue to his home. It was just a 5-minute walk. And that's because his Jewishness was visible. Yeah. Usually I give the recommendation, guys, if you want to wear a kippah, put on a base cap over it. It's more safe. And I would like that I shouldn't say that. I would prefer to say, be proud to be Jewish, show it, but it's not so recommendable.
Felix, you're the German government official here, or quasi-German government official. What do you say to these responses? I mean, is this a matter of perception, or is the danger real that's being described here?
Well, the danger is real. We've just had the publication of criminal offenses of 2019, and there the police Germany-wide counted 2,032 anti-Semitic attacks. The largest number of those is committed by the extreme right. And what really worries me personally is that the percentage of violence has risen from 2.5 to 3.6% last year. So that is really something that has a direct effect on the quality of life of Jewish people. And of course, we have to go against that. And we have countermeasures, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the first step is, of course, to register, to monitor what's happening, to get a good picture of the situation. Because like in real life, if you want to cure a disease, you first have to get the right diagnosis.
But I have to add, we know by research that 8 out of 10 anti-Semitic attacks aren't reported, neither to the police, neither to civil organizations. So we have a huge lack of knowledge. And what I know too, with anti-Muslim attacks and against black people or against LGBTI people, this problem is the same. Yeah. So we have really a lack of knowledge. What Felix just said, 2,000 are registered, but I'm sure the real number is 5 times larger.
Sharon, why do you think anti-Semitism is on the rise here? I mean, unlike the U.S., Germany doesn't have its top leader engaging in or embracing what is widely viewed as hate speech. And even the far-right Alternative for Germany's public approval ratings at the moment are significantly down. So what do you think is causing this rise?
I really feel like it is a similar atmosphere that is going on in the States. There's a general feeling of fear, and people are looking for scapegoats, and we know this pattern. And my activism is more involved with answers, of ways to combat this that are effective. And I feel I'm really glad that the government is counting, because you need to identify the problem. But I feel that a very grassroots approach of women coming together, not to blame each other, not to change each other, Jewish and Muslim women, but to come together around their religion and to try to forge real friendships. This is being done in America, and there's a real desire for this, to get to know people. It sounds like it can't possibly work, but the women who become involved in this organization have contact with 20, 30 other people, and it's by example. So not preaching to each other, not trying to change each other, but making a commitment of time to get to know each other, and then to act against hate and hate speech and take social action for each other injustices against Muslims and Jews.
Biplab, I want to ask you about relationships too, except in this case, I want to ask about the relationship the Berlin police have with minority communities. Do you feel that Berlin police and Berlin government is attentive to racial and ethnic violence the way they need to be?
In general, I would say very, very little empathy for violence against minority community as far as the police is concerned. The government has been supporting organizations like ours who are looking after the people from the minority communities. But as far as the police is concerned, I would say the first problem is that the police in various precincts in Berlin are actually very little empathetic to minority communities, because very often we hear from people that whenever they go to report against these cases, reports are being taken, but the dimension of the attacks or dimension of these violent crimes are being treated as just normal crimes. So that's why this new department with the Public Prosecutor's Office in Berlin has now decided to take up this with the criminal police in Berlin, and they would try to explain and educate their colleagues in different precincts that it does not matter what the police thinks. Police officers who arrive at the scene, whether it's a racist attack or not, it should be taken as racist as and when the victims report it as a racist attack. And they should also mention the religion or the ethnic background of the people so that it can be channeled to the proper department.
Sigmund, you were at this recent conference on anti-Semitism, and you actually mentioned that you thought Berlin police were doing a better job than other police departments perhaps in the country.
In Berlin, it's a little bit better because since 5 years, the Department of Research and Information Against Anti-Semitism, called RIAS, makes education with police officers that the police officers are aware about discrimination, about anti-Semitism, about what the victims are reporting. But nevertheless, there's still much to do. And now just to speak about Halle, which is a great catastrophe for the police, they didn't put protection on Yom Kippur, on the synagogue. After this attack, they treated the victims more as suspects than as victims. There was no empathy, no compassion, no feeling. They didn't try to understand. And that's the point. They can't also prevent new attacks because they are not aware what's happening. They don't see the system. And today, synagogue, tomorrow it could be a Buddhist temple, next week a mosque. Who knows?
Felix, let me ask you, is there room for improvement in the way German authorities deal with the Jewish community?
Well, Sigmund has just mentioned the anti-Semitic terrorist attack we've seen in Halle last year, and that showed to everybody in Germany that it's not the Jewish community exaggerating the situation. No, Halle has shown that there's a deadly dimension of anti-Semitic attack, and that anybody can become a victim of anti-Semitic attacks. As we've seen at the end of the day, there were 2 non-Jews becoming victims and lost their lives because of an anti-Semitic attack. And that was a new dimension of anti-Semitism in this country for a long time. And though it had at least one positive effect, I would say, because everybody now is more aware of that, and that the general public in Germany knows that anti-Semitism is not only attacking the Jewish community, but all of us, the whole community, our democracy, and that the case of Halle has shown, and Sigmund has described it, how little the knowledge of police was, at least, regarding Jewish life. And of course, when you have a Jewish holiday and people go to the synagogue, of course, the situation is different than with an empty synagogue. And I think everywhere in Germany, at least this is what the order is. Wherever a Jewish institution is, the police officer in charge has to know the Jewish calendar. And of course, we have to increase the knowledge of Jewish life in the police. And I think there are now programs where police officers actually do not stand in front of the synagogue, but they also go into the synagogue, see what happens, and to increase the understanding of Jewish life. And that is the strategy, that we have to increase the knowledge of what actually Jewish life is. We have to create possibilities for non-Jews to meet with Jews, including the police, and also Sigmund has mentioned training programs of RIAs, but there are also others where we have to enhance the understanding and sensitivity.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll respond to questions from listeners. Stay tuned to Common Ground.
I'm Marco Werman. On The World, we get an outside perspective.
And you're able to see where is the other person coming from.
Because getting outside yourself can be a good thing. It is The World.
Tuesday through Saturday at 9 a.m. on KCRW Berlin.
Welcome back to Common Ground on KCRW Berlin. I'm Soraya Sarhaddi Nelson, and I'm joined in the studio by Federal Government Commissioner Felix Klein and Sigmount Koenigsberg of the Jewish Community of Berlin. On the phone are Sharon Kuckuck of Berlin's Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom, and Biplab Basu of ReachOut Berlin. We've been talking about anti-Semitism in Berlin and beyond, and whether it's safe these days to be Jewish in Germany. Let's take some listener questions.
Hi, my name's Ari, and I live in Friedrichshain. My question is, do you think that there will ever be a Jewish Bundeskanzler/Bundeskanzlerin? Or at least do you believe that a Jewish person could ever be considered a real candidate?
Okay, Sigmund, I'm going to ask you first.
Not now, but there's a Jewish mayor of Frankfurt at Main, which is one of the largest cities in Germany. So why not?
Felix, Ari also asked whether German politicians who are Jewish can be pro-Israeli without having their loyalty questioned. What do you think?
Well, it addresses a very, very complicated question about loyalty, the double loyalty Jews are criticized to have, which is terrible, which has created really problems. But of course, you can be loyal and positive and supporting Israel and not being attacked for that. And we have Mr. Becker, the anti-Semitism commissioner of Hessen, and mayor of Frankfurt, who is president of the German Israeli Society and a good friend. And I think he's a very, very successful politician.
I would like to add something on that note
Sure,
about
Sharon.
Israel. Yeah, I was going to say that there's another kind of flight that I think Jews living here experience, and that is becoming apologists for Israel. Irregardless of what you believe about Israel, I am not, and people I know are not representing the state. And to put Jews in that position, for me, is another burden of a kind of anti-Semitism.
So the Israeli loyalty question isn't something that just should be posed to Jewish politicians, is what you're saying?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Just the problem of double loyalty. President Trump on his greetings to Rosh Hashanah, he said, and we show you how we love your country, and he meant Israel, and it was a speech to the American Jews, and that shows this problem that Trump suppose Israel is a country for all Jews, even for all American Jews, but Americans are Americans and not Israelis.
Felix, do you think that what happened with Mr. Trump's speech, that is something that Germans understand a little bit better, that being Jewish doesn't mean that your loyalty should be questioned? Or do you think that ignorance, I guess, for lack of a better word, is something that is also prevalent here?
It exists, certainly, and a Jewish friend has just told me that last year he went to Israel for a holiday and his neighbor said, "Oh, you're going home." And then this Jewish friend said, "No, my home is here in Berlin." And so it exists here too. And of course, I couldn't agree more to say that this is really a field of action. We have to go against that equation, Jews equals Israel. Of course, you can't make German Jews or Jews living in Germany responsible for the actions of the Israeli government. But, ignorance, unfortunately, can't be forbidden.
But I have to add that this is a way to communicate anti-Semitism which is accepted by the society. And it's not a question about the politics of the Israeli government. But if one says that the creation of Israel was a bad idea and he denies the right of Israel to exist, then he's beyond the red line.
We have another comment from listener Moshe Stein, who notes that it is not safe to wear kippahs in Berlin and that German schools should be doing more to educate the children of Middle Eastern and African immigrants, who he feels teach their young to hate Jews. I'm going to ask you, Biplab, do you agree with Moshe? Is there a need to focus on changing the attitude of Middle Eastern and African immigrants to their Jewish neighbors?
No, I don't agree with that. 90% of the attacks, anti-Semitic attacks and violence is perpetrated by the white German right-wing people. So the main attackers are not Middle Eastern or black people from Africa, as the listener just pointed out. So maybe he doesn't have enough information on that.
I have to second that what's really important is not to single out people like Muslims and more intercultural exchange. Jews also need to learn more about Muslim traditions and religion, as well as Muslims would be open to learning more about Jewish traditions and religion. It's a two-way street.
Well, the question also had the element of not feeling safe to wear kippahs, and I want to actually ask Felix about that because he brought this up in a statement that was covered last year and got some pushback on that, including from Sigmount. So I was very interested to hear Sigmount say maybe we should put a baseball cap over the kippah. Felix, do you still feel that it's dangerous for Jewish people in Germany to wear symbols of Judaism openly in public?
Well, the situation hasn't really changed much compared to last year when I said that public statement. And of course, what I wanted to say was an alarm call. I want to say it's absolutely outrageous that we have these incidents, that Jews have to feel unsafe in some areas. Of course, there's no 100% security for nobody, actually. But we have to raise awareness. This is what I wanted to do, and this is what we still have to do.
I would like to add also one challenge for my work, that every Jew can wear everywhere a kippah and every Muslim woman can wear her hijab without being attacked.
It's one of your challenges, but again, you changed. I mean, last year you were not very happy when Felix made the statement about not wearing the kippah or being cautious about it, and you said it yourself, though, today.
Yeah, but I'm also adding, I'm doing everything to make it possible.
So we're approaching the end of our show, and I'm going to ask each of you to, in a short sentence or short thought, explain what you think is the pivotal step for German officials or for officials within various communities to help reverse the trend of rising anti-Semitism. And I'm going to start with Biplab.
I think the most important thing is to first recognize and stop this denial strategy and politics of the government and various government departments of racism. And once we accept that it is, of course, I do not fully agree with Mr. Klein that it's a disease. It's not a disease. Disease is a very medical term. So I would say it's a societal, structural problem, and it should be fought at that level. I mean, I just want to remind you all of the fact that in the early 90s, when a lot of Jewish people from the former USSR, I mean, today's Russia and surrounding countries, came to Germany, they had to fight for their stay in Berlin or in Germany. What I'm trying to say that from time to time, even the government officials, politicians, responsible ministers, they come out with statements which are so hateful, which are so racist, that the right-wing and racist groups and individuals get impetus from that. So we have to recognize that racism is a structural and institutional problem, and only then we will be able to develop strategies to fight that.
Felix, what do you think are the pivotal steps, and do you want to respond to what Biplab said?
Well, if I had a recipe against anti-Semitism, I would be very happy to share it with everybody. Unfortunately, we don't have a proper recipe, but I think what is important is to empower the Jewish community, also by public statements for showing solidarity to what the Chancellor has done. I think that's the right way. And in these statements, also to once again to outline that anti-Semitism does not attack only the Jewish community, but all of us. It can hit everybody, so the whole society should go against it.
Sigmount?
I would like to add what's also very important, that not only politics and officials, but everyone should be aware of anti-Semitism, not to look away, not to stand by, but to look if an attack happens. If a man is attacked for his kippah, if a woman is attacked for her hijab. For example, we have got a smartphone, we can make a short video and put it to the police or to me or to Surias. All the perpetrators are not anonymous. They have a face, they have a voice, they have a name, they are visible.
Sharon?
I would like to add something. I do have a recipe against anti-Semitism. I think that people should not, as the Talmud said, not be daunted by the enormity of the problem, to paraphrase, but to feel that they can be empowered on a person-to-person level by joining organizations such as ours to get to know their Muslim neighbors and their Jewish neighbors. They should not be overwhelmed by the problems and the politics and what governments say and do. They should feel empowered as individuals, because we know that the power of the individual can make real change.
That's all the time we have today, unfortunately, and I want to give a big thank you to my guests, Federal German Commissioner for Jewish Life and Against Anti-Semitism, Felix Klein, and Sigmount Koenigsberg of the Jewish Community of Berlin. On the phone are Sharon Kuckuck of Berlin's Sisterhood of Salaam, Shalom, and Biplab Basu of ReachOut Berlin. It was great having you all on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And also thank you to everyone who tuned in. I'm your host, Soraya Sarhaddi Nelson. Join us next Monday for another episode of Common Ground, when we will talk about the upcoming U.S. presidential election and what it means for Americans and Germans. You can hear the show on 104.1 FM in Berlin, or stream it via the KCRW app or kcrwberlin.com. Common Ground is also available as a podcast, so download it wherever you get yours.